I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. And this is Currents.
We'll meet some locals who have the right stuff.
A lot of the Catholic writers now are tired of letting the media explain what the Catholic Church is all about.
Her world may have come down, but she lived to write about it.
I was laid off from a position I had here in New York City. I decided to move to Central Florida to seek employment there and leave my husband behind in what was a turbulent time in our relationship.
And an author tells us how his life with the Saints took him on a unique journey.
My life with the Saints started out exercising pride. I was doing these kind of short poetic reflections on the Saints.
Well, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us this Monday night. Well, one well-known book that you might have heard of, many call it the Good Book, in fact, tells us that in the beginning was the Word. Well, tonight we're bringing you many words and words of wisdom from a number of Catholic writers.
Indeed we are, and we begin with a trip out to Immaculate Conception Seminary in Huntington, Long Island. Catholic writers and authors gathered there for a conference they called The Word Made Flesh. And along the way, they offered us some thoughts and words about what it means to write about the Church today in all forms of media.
This is a new adventure, this conference, and there's a lot of quality writing coming out these days. On Long Island, in Brooklyn and Queens, we have many people who are engaged in this area, and our Catholic newspapers, okay, whether it be the Tablet or the Long Island Catholic, are excelling in these areas and trying to educate people, to share with people, and to get them more involved in their faith.
Probably the most exciting piece about today is that I see it as another arm of new evangelization, that whole spirit of that. I see it as aiding every and all causes in the Church, and what we want to do is be able to assist people in making a huge impact with their writing.
The Holy Father urged people working in the arts, do not be afraid to talk of God and to manifest without fear the signs of faith, letting the light of Christ shine in the presence of people today. At this gathering, we speak of the might of the pen, which is indeed greater than that of the sword.
I haven't met too many Catholic writers who don't really love the Church. I mean, there are one or two I kind of suspect, but for the most part, the Catholic writers I know are all people who are passionately wanting to promote and serve the Church and to correct a lot of the misperceptions that are out there about the Church.
I think with a lot of the Catholic writers now are tired of letting the media explain what the Catholic Church is all about, and then these writers, these people that are here today, I mean, mothers and fathers and just regular people are just, they're tired of it, and they're just picking up on their computers and just writing something, and there is a following that is growing in this field.
The accessibility of new media has just caused an explosion. There are so many of us raising our children and working jobs and all sorts of other things who can't be full-time writers. And yet you can, if you have a computer in your home, you can podcast, you can blog, you can write articles for online magazines, and you may not make very much, you may make nothing at all, but you can have an impact and really connect with other writers and other Catholics. It's extraordinary the effect that you can have from your home.
I see something really exciting happening in Catholic media. I think that the Catholic Church has been really slow to jump with it, but now between the Pope telling priests to get on the blogs and something like Currents and Net New York coming in and doing a daily news show, and Boston TV doing what it's doing, these are really dynamic and exciting things that are happening in media.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The purpose of all the words we as individuals, the words we speak and write, is to show forth the splendor of that one great Word who is Christ.
Well, we will hear from a couple of other Catholic writers coming up later on in the show, including a woman who's lived a lifetime in 625 days.
She sure has. But stay tuned. When Currents returns, we'll have the day's headlines, including the controversy over the mosque near Ground Zero reaches the White House.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Coming up later, the Saints are his specialty, and we are not talking about the football team. Author and Jesuit Father James Martin talks about his life and his calling.
But first, let's turn to the day's headlines. Well, freedom of religion made its way into the headlines over the weekend as President Obama weighed in on the controversy surrounding a proposed Islamic center near Ground Zero in Manhattan. Democrats and Republicans are at odds with each other over the plans, which call for a mosque 2 blocks from the site of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. CNN's Sandra Endo has the latest on the political back and forth.
During a growing debate, President Obama says Muslims have a right to build a planned mosque and Islamic center near Ground Zero in New York City.
In this country, we treat everybody equally in accordance with the law, regardless of race, regardless of religion. I was not commenting, and I will not comment on the wisdom of making a decision to put a mosque there.
Some consider the president's comments Saturday as backing away from his original statement just a day earlier at a dinner to mark the Islamic holy month of Ramadan.
I believe that Muslims have the right to practice their religion as everyone else in this country. And that includes the right to build a place of worship in a community center on private property in Lower Manhattan in accordance with local laws and ordinances.
It's an emotional debate considering the devastating toll of the 9/11 terror attacks. Democrats and Republicans are divided on the issue, as is reaction to the president's comments.
The government has no right and no business to comment one way or the other on whether a church or a synagogue or a mosque should be anywhere so long as they meet the legal requirements.
You can't be changing your position from day to day on an issue which does go to our Constitution, and it also goes to extreme sensitivity. So that's where I'm critical of the president on it, for not being clear.
Well, Congressman King, who you just saw there, is not the only politician who's criticized plans to build the Islamic Center. But another mosque just blocks from Ground Zero seems to have gone unnoticed. CNN's Susan Candiati now, she paid a visit to that house of worship this weekend.
Here we are on the corner of Church and Warren Streets in Lower Manhattan, and about 4 blocks in that direction is Ground Zero. You can see where that crane is. That's where construction is going on right now. And about halfway between there and here is the proposed site of that controversial Islamic center. What most people don't know is about a half block from where I'm standing is the site of another very small mosque that has been here for about 40 years in the neighborhood without one whiff of controversy. I went over there to kind of check things out. This man worships at Masjid Manhattan, and he thinks the new mosque should be built.
A lot of people got a bad idea of us because of what happened between the 9/11 and all that. But they don't represent our religion, they don't represent the Muslim. We want to show to other people that our religion can be like all other people. We can mix with all other, like Christian or Jew. Every religion got its problem. But I think more eyes on us right now because of these things.
His mosque has not taken a formal stand on the controversy, but says it opposes terrorism and promotes peace.
It's never been a problem. The people at the mosque have always been very respectful.
Lucas Gonzalez has lived next to the mosque since before 9/11. Unlike nearly 70% of Americans and more than half of New Yorkers in recent polling, he approves of the proposed cultural center.
It's been hard for us to rebuild, and as it goes up slowly, I think that there's some hope there that we can sort of rebuild and come to terms with what's happened to us and the differences that have set us apart.
As time goes on, will both sides simply harden their positions, or can there be a compromise?
That report from CNN's Susan Candiati. Well, Governor David Paterson yesterday signed a bill into law that legalizes no-fault divorce in New York. Now, couples are allowed to end their marriage by mutual consent and without a 1-year waiting period. Under the old law, the couple either had to separate for 1 year or one spouse had to accuse the other of adultery, cruelty, abandonment, or spending excessive time in jail before a divorce could be granted. The New York State Catholic Conference and the National Organization for Marriage are two groups we spoke with who opposed the legislation. They said it would harm children and increase the state's divorce rate. After signing the bill, though, Governor Paterson said, quote, "Finally, New York has brought its divorce laws into the 21st century." Well, some former employees of St. Vincent's Hospital in Manhattan say they want answers about poor financial management by executives at their former place of employment. The Greenwich Village Hospital shut its doors for good back in April, and court documents show it had more than $1 billion in debt at the time. Today, a group of former St. Vincent's employees filed a lawsuit in Manhattan Supreme Court to try to get the state health department to release paperwork about what went wrong. The suit says St. Vincent's management continued to spend millions of dollars, including a $278,000 expenditure on a golf outing. Now, while the hospital was still in danger of closing, all of that money was still being spent, they say. Now, more than 3,000 employees lost their jobs when St. Vincent's closed. In the meantime, the New York Post published an article on Sunday blaming the Archdiocese of New York for dumping debt on St. Vincent's back in 2001. The Archdiocese says its affiliation with the Sisters of Charity, who sponsored the hospital, ended 2 years earlier. The Sisters of Charity were affiliated with the Diocese of Brooklyn at the time, but diocesan spokesman Monsignor Kieran Harrington told me that a court-approved restructuring plan back in 2007 addressed any debt incurred by St. Vincent's.
Tense moments in France yesterday as tens of thousands of people had to be evacuated from the Shrine of Lourdes Sunday after a bomb threat. We get details now from Rome Reports.
Normality has returned to the Shrine of Lourdes in France after a bomb scare which turned out to be a hoax. Police evacuated 30,000 pilgrims celebrating the Feast of the Assumption of the Virgin. An anonymous phone call to police warned that 4 explosives were to be set off in the shrine at 3 p.m. After the evacuation, security forces searched the area for the bombs, which turned out to be a false alarm. The procession of the Feast of the Assumption was celebrated on schedule at 4:30 in the afternoon. This wasn't the first time that the shrine has had to deal with a bomb scare. Lourdes was evacuated after a similar episode in 2002.
Colombian officials are thanking God for a miracle. Lightning hit a plane as it was coming in for a landing on San Andreas Island early Sunday. The plane broke apart, but only one of the 131 people on board was killed. A man who works in the luggage department at the airport snapped these pictures of the wreckage. He describes it as a miracle because after seeing the wreckage, it's unbelievable that just one person died. He said people were desperately trying to get help and that passengers were quickly evacuated. San Andreas Governor Pedro Gallardo told a Colombian newspaper, quote, "We lament this tragedy, but at the same time, we give thanks to God because the accident could have been much worse." Back in this country, the publicist for Zaza Gabor says a priest was called to the actress's bedside yesterday to administer what's commonly referred to as the last rites of the Catholic Church. Gabor, who is 93 years old, has been hospitalized for most of the past month since breaking her hip in a fall from bed on July 17th. The spokesman said the actress was rushed to Ronald Reagan UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles from her Bel Air, California home Friday night, where she underwent treatment for complications stemming from her recent hip replacement surgery. As her condition worsened, Gabor asked for a priest to perform the last rites, or what the church officially calls the anointing of the sick. And finally, San Francisco 49ers running back Glenn Coffey shocked the sporting world late last week when he announced his retirement from football at the age of 23. Now, we've learned why he called it quits. In an interview with the California newspaper, Coffey said football was no longer his dream since he found Christ. He said it was a decision he struggled with for a long time because everyone expected him to play football, but he felt God was calling him to leave the game. Coffey says he will go back to college and complete his degree in consumer affairs and then go on to get his master's. Coffey left the University of Alabama after his junior year to enter the NFL draft and had been with the 49ers for just one season.
Retiring at the age of 23.
Yeah, sounds nice, huh?
Right. Well, stay tuned. There's much more currents coming up. Just ahead, can you fit a lifetime into 625 days? We'll hear from a writer who did just that.
Because I didn't have anyone really that I could speak to that was near me, I started journaling.
Welcome back. Well, we continue tonight with our look at Catholic writers. And you might call our next guest an accidental author, a young woman who, by all accounts, never set out to write a book.
But for 625 days, Abigail Suzannes kept a journal during what she describes as really the most difficult time of her life, and at a time when she felt closest to God as well. From that journal came her book, Living a Lifetime in 625 Days. She stopped by our studio recently to discuss that journey and to share her insights. Abigail, thank you so much for joining us on Currents today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
And for bringing your book and your story to us, Living a Lifetime in 625 Days. 2006 was not a great year for you. You lost a lot. You lost a lot of connections and people. Tell us about what it was that you lost in 2006 and what's in this book.
In January of 2006, I was actually facing my 6th month of unemployment. I was laid off from a position I had here in New York City, but I was in my 8th month of home ownership in Florida. So in order not to lose that home, I decided, even though I was married at the time, that I needed to move to Central Florida to seek employment there and leave my husband behind in what was a turbulent time in our relationship. Shortly after the move, he decided, after I was there for several weeks, that the marriage could not continue, and we separated. So in essence, I also lost my relationship.
And you ended up turning to your faith in this time in order to get stronger.
Sure. I did cleave onto my faith because of the fact that I had lost all of my other resources that I was accustomed to in New York. In Florida, I didn't know anything else. I didn't know anyone. The only family I had was my mother, who lived 45 minutes away from me, and she had told me that one of the first things she always does when she moves to a new place is find the church, the nearest church, and from there you get all of your other connections. And she met mostly socially, but in light of what I was going through personally, it ended up opening so many other doors for me and ended up just really sustaining me and saving me.
Because a lot of times studies will say the most stressful things that can happen to you is job loss, relationship loss, death, divorce, those kinds of things can really be the most traumatic. So what specifically did you find in your church community there that was really somewhat helpful to you to rebolster your strength, to find hope and to look forward? And then also, what brought you to the thought of putting it all down on paper so that you could share your story?
Because I didn't have anyone really that I could speak to that was near me, I started journaling. And I would just, I had injured my hands because I was so angry because of the separation, and so I couldn't write. So I had my laptop near me, and I would just wake up and write out my feelings on my laptop before I could face the day. And so after I did that, when I wasn't working, because I eventually did find work, I would go to a prayer circle at the church. It was the only one that I knew of that they had on a night that I was off from work. From the prayer circle, one night I spoke to the pastor, and he told me about a pastoral associate that was available at the church that I should go and speak to, because she was a woman that had gone through divorce herself. And from there, she recommended me to seek counseling through Catholic Charities. From my Catholic Charities counselor, I got involved in separated and divorced support groups. And all that time, they encouraged me to continue with my writing, so that when I wasn't connected to these other people that I was starting to meet and open up to, I would still have the other outlet. And even when I had to move away from them, the writing continued to sustaining me, and that's where the story came out from.
And the way that it is structured, and we can see this a little bit, but basically it's like journal entries. So it'll tell you whatever the date is and what you were thinking and having to experience at that time. Who is this targeted for? Who would you hope reads this book?
Initially, it was for me, because at the end of the experience, I really wanted to look at how far I had come. But now that it is published, I do have several audiences in mind. A lot of my girlfriends in New York City that I left behind, a lot of them were single when I left, and I didn't want them to become disillusioned with the sacrament of marriage and the belief in love, because I still believe in marriage and I still believe in love. And so I wanted to let them know that even though it's difficult, there's still a purpose, even through trial and everything, and God delivers every trial for a purpose, and that we shouldn't shy away from what is in front of us, because God will get us through whatever it is.
Right.
And then, of course, my other audience is for someone that has gone through this, because I had found so much through the people that I spoke with when I was going through this. A lot of people turned away from their faith when they had gone through experiences of separation and divorce, and even loss through death. The questioning of why would God do this to me? Why would God take this away from me? And I actually knew that that was the only thing that was going to get me through. And so I want to say to those people that it's not going away from God that's going to help you. It's staying with Him that's going to pull you through.
Well, Abigail, thank you so much for your inspiring story and continued success. I know you're now working on behalf of the church in Florida now.
I am. It's a hard job, but I'm happy to do it.
All right. Thanks for joining us on Currents today.
Thank you very much.
Abigail was really pleasant to talk to, and, you know, a tough time, and certainly something that I can identify with. I kind of went through a period there where my relationship and, you know, my home and all those things were lost, my job as well. But again, rebuilding, finding strength through your faith and also through your writing, I think that really is a good example that she set, and she really reached out and wanted support, and then she was able to get support in return.
Yeah, no, sharing that story with others, and hopefully it can be of help to them. And I mean, it's such a personal thing for her because it's what she went through day by day. During a very, very difficult time in her life, and you know, hopefully it'll be of help seeing where she went and then how she got out of it to the place that she is now. Hopefully that's going to be of help to a lot of people. So yeah, she's got a big audience for this book.
Yeah, she certainly does. She's definitely an inspiring person for, I think, a lot of young women out there, those who are single and those who are married too. Well, I've written a little bit more about Abigail and her book on our blog. Just head over to currentsny.net and click on Riding the Wave.
But for now, stay tuned. There's more Currents coming up. Just ahead, he's walked with the saints and sits down with us to talk about his journey.
The more you read the lives of the saints, the more you realize that we too are called to be like them. As one scholar said, we long to be who they were.
Well, finally tonight we move from writers to saints. Actually, it's not a total leap from tonight's Catholic Writers theme here, because we're actually going to meet a man who's written a book about saints.
He sure did. The book, My Life with the Saints, is considered by many to be a modern-day classic. Its author, James Martin, has been a Jesuit priest for 10 years, but before his priesthood, his life was very different.
He talked to us about his journey to the priesthood and his life as a writer ahead of taking his final vows. And tonight, Father James Martin is our eyewitness.
The more you read the lives of the saints, the more you realize that we too are called to be like them. As one scholar said, we long to be who they were. Most people think that priests come from super religious backgrounds. I did not. My parents were Catholic, but not super Catholic. When I was working at General Electric, I started to realize that I was miserable, basically. And I was getting all these stomach problems, and I was working too hard and really wanted a way out. And I turned on the television set and saw a documentary about Thomas Merton, the Trappist monk. And that got me thinking about Merton and religious life and monastic life, which seemed very beautiful. Originally, the Jesuits were just presented to me as one option. And I really did not know very much about the Jesuits at all. I had no idea what a Jesuit was. But the more I got to know about them, the more I liked the idea that you could be a priest and something else, or a brother and something else. So a priest and a writer, a priest and an artist, a priest and a teacher. And that really appealed to me. I'm much happier. I'm 100 times happier than I was when I was at GE. The life of a writer seems very exciting to people who aren't writing. Part of it is exciting. I mean, having books published and getting to talk about them and giving talks and things like that and getting letters from readers. Part of it is very dull. I mean, a lot of it is sitting in front of a computer trying to figure out the right word. I really like it. I mean, I would write all day if I could, frankly. I'd be happy to write from now until, you know, kingdom come. It's very rewarding as a writer when you find that your books or your articles have brought people closer to Jesus. And that's happened a lot. Not thanks to me, but thanks to the Holy Spirit. Particularly with this book on the saints, My Life with the Saints. My Life with the Saints started out as an exercise in pride. I was doing these kind of short poetic reflections on the saints, and I thought I'd write a page or two of each saint, and you know, people would just fall over because they were so beautiful. And I brought the 50 pages to a friend of mine, and I said, here's my beautiful book. And he looked at it and said, this is ridiculous. You can't just, you know, sort of dilate on the saints in a page or two, assuming people know their stories. You have to provide some context, and you need to provide some structure.
Since it's both in Spanish and English.
I'm professing my final vows on All Saints' Day. It was all providential. I had called the Jesuit Provincial in New England, where I'm a member, And he said the only day he could do it is November 1st. And I looked up on the calendar. I said, well, it's All Saints Day, so I definitely want to do it then. So it worked out very well. There's always regrets. I lament the fact that, you know, I can't have an intimate relationship with someone. I would like to have my own house or apartment. I'd like to call my own shots in terms of, you know, where I go and what I do. But I think what's key is, you know, what's your governing desire? What do you really feel like you're called to? And once you understand that, you can choose it and then say, all right, I need to let go of some of the other possibilities. The goal of the Jesuits is to help souls. And everything for the greater glory of God. So I'm happy that, that these words have helped at least a few souls.
Father James Martin there, he's a great guy. He's, you know, I've just been so, because I've actually had to meet him a couple of times, and I've interviewed him for the show here, and just a very, very pleasant guy to be around, and knows a whole lot about a whole lot of different things. And he's a culture editor for America Magazine and all that. He keeps up with, you know, modern day culture and all of this, but also has a lot of knowledge, as you saw there, about the saints. So his knowledge kind of spans the ages.
Yeah, it does. And he also has a lot of, if you will, real world knowledge, because like you said, he was working at GE, he was very miserable, but then elected to become a priest, and you know, likes the fact that through the Jesuit calling he can be a writer and he can also be a priest as well. And the fact that he found his calling, I think, like he said, which was most surprising to me, he'd still love to have his own house, he'd still like to have perhaps an intimate relationship, but he realizes that what he really is called to do is this, and he's so much happier doing it.
It's paramount.
Than anything else, precisely.
There you go.
Well, that is it for this edition of Currents. On tomorrow's show, who is Jesus walking with? An art collection has some striking images and answers.
But until then, remember, you can always watch us online. Go over to currentsny.net on the World Wide Web. We're also on Facebook and Twitter as well. Well, for all of us here at Currents, I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.